They go, what can I buy for 200 grand? I'm like, well, go to Home Depot and they have a couple of sheds there that cost between $12,000 to $15,000, and then buy a few of them.
Hi everyone, it's Henrietta and Heather, and welcome to a Millennial podcast where we dive deep into the life of our 30s.
We'll discuss our struggles, dreams, relationships, icks, and anything millennials can relate to. Sit back, relax, and let's head on this journey together. We are 30s Unfiltered.
Hi everyone, welcome to 30s Unfiltered. I'm Henrietta, and as always, I'm joined by my beautiful co-host Heather. Today, we're talking about one of the biggest milestones for many of us in our 30s, buying a home. And whether you are actually ready to jump into the housing market or just curious about the process, we've got you covered.
Yes, and to help us break it all down, we brought in a special guest, our good friend and real estate expert, Ivan Londono, who actually helped me buy my first home back in 2020. We're so excited for him to share what he knows with all of us. So let's give him a warm welcome into the podcast.
Hey.
Hi.
Hello,
Hi.
everybody. Hola, ¿cómo están?
Muy bien, ¿y tú?
Un poquito inglés, un poquito.
Let's not do this whole thing in Spanish.
All right,
That would
sounds
be
good.
interesting, though. We could, but I'm kidding.
Henrietta knows how to speak Spanish.
Well, she probably knows more than Heather, I see now.
Yes.
I'm an honorary Mexican. What can I say?
There we go.
Almost all of my friends and best friends in LA are Mexican. Most of them are Mexican, some Colombian, some Venezuelan, Peruvian.
Yeah, there we go.
I have like all. That's
well,
why
you gotta introduce him to Heather. Heather has like two friends, I think, or one. So
I already have
friends.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God.
I
This
know.
is Yvonne just gonna start shitting on me this whole time.
That's how it is when you bring like your own, like your friend into something like this. That's how it is. You're gonna be roasted.
It's all good. Exactly. And it's
gonna happen.
I'm
Do you
okay
like
with it.
when Tomas comes here, he's gonna do the same exact thing to me. He's like my older brother. He's gonna do the same exact thing to me.
You know, Yvonne is like, yeah, you're like my older brother, no?
Oh, I was almost like her father those 3 months we had to ride together. But of
that's
course,
what
she
you
was the
want.
daughter that never listened, and here we are.
He was like
Yeah.
my therapist. We would drive to go see homes. It was hilarious.
I mean, I don't know if this is in video, but you see all this gray hair?
It wasn't there before you met Heather.
Oh, 2020 started happening.
I believe it. Kidding. So, I mean, that's a good segue because I wanted to ask, like, how and when did you guys meet each other?
I think it was through a past client of our office, called us out and say, hey, I have a friend of mine that is definitely looking to buy a house, and you guys did a great job with us. Can you please assist her? I think I called you or you called me, and then we got on talking. And what I do with every client that I meet for the first time, I like to meet in person. Now, a lot of times we do it through these ways, but I love to do it in person if they're in the area, because that way I can sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and explain the numbers and set expectations of what is that person looking to do, because I'm just getting to know these people. And then from there, set expectations of what are we going to go and find. I think you weren't sure, and then we sat down. I explained to you, you definitely need to do it. Right now is the time. As we probably know, most of us, real estate is in cycles, and at that time was like the correct time to buy at the moment. So that's what I told her, this is what you qualify for. Let's try to find you something. She goes, well, but maybe I don't want to live there. I'm like, that's fine. At least buy something that is going to start gaining equity on the house, because we're in California. Everything gains equity. Sometimes people go, oh, so what can I buy there for? Sometimes people from that, they don't know the market. They go, what can I buy for 200 grand? I'm like, well, go to Home Depot and they have a couple of sheds there that cost between $12,000 to $15,000, and then buy a few of them. And literally a shed at Home Depot will cost you between $3,000 to $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. That's a shed.
Yeah.
Do you see why I love Yvonne? Yvonne is hilarious.
We love people who are like, like down to the nitty gritty and like wanting to like speak from we have a saying in Norway, talk from your liver. Do you say that? In a lot of Latin American countries, a lot of those saying are exactly the same. Do you say something like
Oh,
that?
I mean, you just said a lot. I'm a Latin, I'm Colombian, and I'm a realtor. You said I spoke from the liver. We barely have a liver. All we do is drink, right? We're realtors. That's the impression we have on people. Come on.
But it's just like, so it just means like you're just giving it to someone straight. That's what that expression means.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
sometimes is a case by case scenario, and some friend clients that be always pretty much every client of mine becomes a friend or becomes somebody that they know they can call me and I can help them out. Even if, as you were mentioning at the beginning, if they're gonna go to Cancun, I can give them a list of restaurants that they can go and visit, right? Because they know I
Yeah.
love food. So
Yeah.
sometimes people, those clients, they need a straight. And some people, we need to find a way of how to communicate it to them so that way they understand and they don't get frustrated from the get-go. But if
Yeah.
you don't set those expectations since the beginning, the frustration is gonna come later, and then there is a bunch of wasted time.
Right.
Right.
But I think a difference is you understand people and you shift and you change your language based on the person. And I think that's why people love you because you're such a resource.
Definitely. I mean, and I sometimes I come across as rude, and I'm like, hey, just give me 2, 3 more years, and then you'll figure it out. And like, oh, it's gonna take me 3 years to find a house.
Exactly.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I moved here when I was 17 to go to college. I went to Oregon State. While I was at Oregon State, I got an internship job with a U.S. bank. I worked
Yeah.
there for a couple of years, and I felt that I wanted to do some more. I didn't want to have a 9 to 5 and kind of be um, limited to programs that only banks offer very few programs. And I started learning the broker side through friends that had a brokerage. And I started kind of getting involved with them in the weekends. I'm like, hey guys, I have clients from the bank that they don't qualify. Can we help them here? And they go, of course. We have multiple programs, we have multiple lenders, and they explain to me the broker side, which I think is very important for our audience and for everybody's listening. You have many options. So you have a checking account and a savings account with US Bank. You can walk in there and they'll give you great service, and they will probably offer you a great program. But sometimes you don't fit that program.
Mm.
So that's when you go to the broker and you have multiple options. You tell me your story. Oh, I'm self-employed, or I'm 1099, I'm W-2. That way we can go in and try it. Where if you go to US Bank, they just tell you to fill up an application, give you some paperwork, and they decide for you what's good for you. Where differently, and Heather can vouch, we sit down and we find out together what was the best program for her.
And
Right.
that can be applied to whether or not like you'd be qualified for a loan to buy
Definitely.
a house. This is all tied into like escrow and all that stuff too.
Definitely. All this
Yeah.
escrow comes way after when
Right.
you definitely get an offer accepted, which is probably gonna come through when we keep talking. But
Yeah.
so then I decided to leave US Bank and start my own business, and I could have done it in the worst time ever because it was 2008. As I mentioned earlier, there is cycles on the real estate industry, and we survived it, and here we are, and we just went through a pandemic, which it was great for us. One of
It
the
was
busiest
amazing.
years
But
ever
it's
for us
insane.
was
Yeah.
2021 ever. Like I've been
Yeah.
doing this for, I don't know, 20 something years, and that was the busiest year for us. Why? Because interest rates were on the 2s and the 3s.
Yeah.
And now it's the opposite. Inflation is fun.
It was now, like, for example, Heather, she goes, I might want to buy my second property, and you want to start building a real estate portfolio because now her house, let's say, is worth 150 to 200 grand more than when she purchased it. She goes, I want to refi that loan. I'm like, well, I wouldn't do that because you have a 3%. So there is options that you can do, like a HELOC, which is an equity line of credit, where you can pull money out without touching your first. And with that equity line of credit, you can use that as a down payment for your next property. So that's why
Oh.
it's so important that you connect with the right person that you trust and that is going to explain to you and educate. I love to educate because that way I don't have to sell. So everybody goes, oh, real estate people are always selling and door knocking. Yes, we have to do that too to get the listings. But when you educate people, then they come to you because
Yeah.
they know that you're
They trust you.
explaining, what the process is. So you have a little bit more knowledge. That way you don't come in with your eyes folded and blinded and didn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Very
But
important.
before we get into all the complicated stuff, Yvonne, I kind of want to bring it back to the basics, right?
Sure.
For our audience of who is like looking to buy a house, there's a lot of fear around purchasing a home. And You know, even for me, for myself, I was 30 when I bought my
Yeah,
home. I was 29 when I was in the
I
process.
think
And
so.
so I
Yeah, because we
was,
started like right at the end of the year and we finished at the beginning or something. I don't remember.
yeah, it was like October 2020 when we closed. And then
Yes.
my birthday, my 30th birthday, celebrated in that house. So I know there's a lot of people that have, like, let's start off with
Well,
the
thanks for the
basics.
invite, by the way. But anyways.
Yeah, it was a bunch of girls, okay? Stop it. Let's start off with the basics. So we have some questions here that we want to ask you. So
Definitely. Let's shoot.
yeah, let's start.
Yeah, it's funny because like I don't think I have really thought about the idea of like me buying a house in the States because first of all, the fact that I'm foreign and you know I've been there living like under a visa, so I don't even think I probably could never buy a house
You
in
can.
the situation that I've already been in. And also I never thought about the you know process of buying a house because literally everyone in Norway is a homeowner. All of my friends currently, like to this date, are homeowners, except for myself. And most of them are they're in a house, but it's if they're here in my hometown, they have a house. If they're in Oslo, the capital, they most likely have an apartment or a condo.
It's every culture is different and every
Totally.
place is different where you acquire your homes, but you're getting your house next too. Because you just said
Me,
your friends are getting it, you're gonna get it too.
She is.
yeah, I definitely like one day my dream is to have a house, like a Spanish modern house in LA. That is my
You can
dream.
come work with us.
So Yvonne, people like Henrietta, they come here to the States. So you're saying they are able to buy a home, or is that
Yes.
a possibility?
So there is it's called, is foreign nationals. So
Mm,
definitely, like right now, we open office with my business partner in Florida about 2 years ago. And his market hasn't been owner occupied like Heather or any of us like families. His market has been people from South and Central America that are pulling their money out from our countries for instabilities that we're having over there, and they're
mm,
buying in the US. And of course, the gateway to the US is always Florida because you can buy a condo there for 300-400 grand. Here, a condo will cost you 700 or 800.
yeah,
So
yeah,
here in this area, of course, in Southern California.
yeah.
So there is definitely new programs for foreign nationals that can definitely buy their properties here. Of course, there is going to be limitations because
Yeah,
higher down payments, right?
Right.
of course.
They're not gonna give a foreign national an FHA loan or down payment assistance where you have to come in with
Exactly.
as low as 3%
Right,
when you don't even live here, right? So,
right.
but there is definitely programs that we are helping people buy properties
Mhm.
here in the US, even though they're from different countries.
But it is
Yeah,
possible, right?
yeah.
I
I mean,
mean,
I mean,
with us, with a broker, it's
yeah.
possible. You go to US Bank and they're going to tell you no.
Right.
So that's why it's so important that you're not just a realtor and educate people. You got to have a great team around you. So you
Yeah.
mentioned escrow. So if I have a listing, I have an escrow team that I know that I work with because they're the
Mhm.
ones that control the whole transaction. So you
Right.
don't want to deal with an escrow that is not answering to you. You don't want to deal with an escrow that is not giving you updates. Why? Because they're the ones that control the whole escrow transaction, right? And
Mhm.
what is escrow? Escrow is when you have submitted an offer for a property and then the seller accepts your offer, then you open an escrow. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you send what is called an EMD, which is the earnest money deposit. It's like the good faith deposit that you're depositing on that escrow, letting the
Mhm.
seller know that you're serious and you're going to continue now with this whole transaction. And an
Mhm.
escrow, which they call it, or are you in escrow? Yes, you're in escrow, meaning we're going to be 30 days dealing with this transaction. And in those 30 days, the seller has some duties or tasks that they have to perform by providing reports from the city, from the IRS, from taxes, property taxes, from the county.
Mhm.
And then the buyer has other tasks like home inspections, where in a home inspection, they're going to check your roof, they're going to check your plumbing, a lot of
Right.
stuff that is kind of superficial. And then if you see, or there is any red flags with that regular or general home inspection, then you bring
Mhm.
experts, like for example, a foundation expert, a roof
Mhm.
expert, a plumber. That way the buyer has certain amount of time, which is negotiated before you open escrow per contract, to see if they want to keep moving forward or not with this property. And then of
Mhm.
course, if you find issues, doesn't mean that you're going to cancel escrow. whole real estate is about transaction and negotiations. So
Yeah.
if you find issues through the escrow in the home inspections or any of the inspections that you do, termite inspection, for example, every house in California has termites. So there is not going to be a termite inspection that has no termites, right? But sometimes you have worse stuff like rotten wood or stuff like that. At that point, that doesn't mean that the buyer is going to go, no, I don't want this house, right? They're going to come back and say, hey, this is how much all this cost. Let's go back to the seller and say, hey, can you please give me a credit of $15,000, $20,000? Or can you guys repair these items? That way it's not an issue and we'll still pay the price that we negotiated at.
Right.
So that's very important.
So basically, because that was one of my questions, like and like in layman's terms. So basically it's like you get 30 days once you start the escrow to get your ducks in a row to be able to sell or take over or buy a house.
30 days, that's whatever days that you agreed on the negotiation when you accept
Got it.
So sometimes when people is buying cash, they say, oh, we close in 15 days. So we have an escrow in 15 days. If you're doing a loan, then you need 30 days because lenders take between 25 to 30 days to do their loan and the due diligence, because the lender is also going to do their due diligence, which the most important step of one of those transactions is called an appraisal.
Right. Yeah,
where the lender sends an expert, licensed appraiser, to determine the value of the house. Right?
Yeah.
So there we go. Let's say we're buying a house at $800,000 and the appraisal comes at $760. Now we're back to negotiating. Does the buyer still wants the house? Because the house is going to sell for whatever it's worth for the buyer.
Right.
But the appraisal is going to determine if you can finance that home or not. If the buyer has the extra money to cover that difference and they really want the house, then we negotiate. We tell the seller, hey, we're $40,000 away. Appraisal came lower. Give it to me for $760. And the seller can say, sorry, I know my house is worth more. If you want to cancel, go ahead and cancel and I'll list the house again. Or we can say, well, let's meet in the middle. Right. Let's meet at 780. You bring the 20,000. You can still get your financing and let's get this done. So it's always a negotiation, and that's one of the most important parts is the appraisal. So escrows can be 15 days. Sometimes escrows are 60 days. Why? Because the seller needs that time to find another property. So you structure it that way. We're going to do it a 60-day escrow, and then we'll go from there.
So does that also count as, like, what if you're a first-time home buyer? Like, remember, there's the first-time home buyer program. Does that play a factor? Is there any room for negotiation on that?
So yeah, so let's back up because we're already in escrow and we haven't even approved you for the loan, right? So people starts looking at properties because there is a lot of ways now with your phone to go to Redfin, to go to Zillow, and then you start looking at homes because you think you can buy that house, right? In that neighborhood that you want to live at. And that's where the frustration happens, because the first step of buying a home, of course, is saving that money for the down payment. And then the second step is to get you pre-qualified to see how much you qualify for. That way, you know how much you can afford and if that money is going to help you buy a house in the area that you want it. What happens a lot of times, people start looking on the areas that they think they're going to be able to buy. They start backwards, right? And they go, oh, I love this house. It was $800,000, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I want to put an offer. I'm like, okay, have you been pre-qualified? Right? Oh, no, I haven't. I mean, they told me at US Bank that most likely I will qualify. I'm like, have they really pre-qualified you? They go, no. I'm like, well, let me pre-qualify you first to see if you qualify for those $800,000. And that's when I ask questions. How much money you have to put down? How much money you make? How much liabilities you have on your credit, monthly liabilities? Okay. All this stuff. And then I look and see how much he qualifies for, and let's say in this example that we're doing, they only qualify for $650. So if they're already looking at properties, they're going to feel frustrated because maybe in that area, you're not going to find houses at $650. So you should have started first by pre-qualifying yourself. And then go from there and start looking at properties that you like. For example, let's go to Heather. Heather, she lived here. I mean, for people that is here in LA, I don't know if you guys probably have people over the world, but here in LA, we're in an area that is called, I'm in an area that is called San Fernando Valley. Heather is by the water in Marina del Rey, rich and famous. But
Bougie.
me, I'm here in the valley, and that's where she
Yeah.
was kind of before, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when we did the prequal, we decided that the best place for her to buy was a little bit up north, like 12, 15 miles up north, which is where I live, actually. It's a great place to raise families, and I love it, right? So that's where we ended up purchasing. But at the beginning, she was looking at properties here. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. So, and that's when the frustration happens. And let's say you're a married couple and the wife is going crazy looking at homes, and then she falls in love with a couple homes, and now you got to tell her, we don't qualify for this.
Yeah.
And then you feel frustrated. Then going back to Heather's question, now you have to do down payment assistance programs, right? So that means you don't have much money to purchase. So this is going to be a government-backed loan, which is called FHA loan. You can come as low as 3.5% down. They have down DPAs, down payment assistance programs, where sometimes they give you a grant or they give you loans that are going to help you down with that down payment assistance. What happens with that? There is way more limitations when you're looking for the property, because if you don't have that much money, that means you're going to end up in a condo or in a townhome. Townhomes and condos have something called HOA, homeowners associations. If that HOA is not FHA approved, you cannot use those programs. So, for example, here in the valley, in this area that I'm at, I think only 3 to 5% of those HOAs are approved FHA. So they won't be able to buy that, right? So they won't be able to use those government programs or those really low down payments. So, like what Heather's question was, well, what about those down payment assistance programs or government programs? Oh, they're great, but there is going to be way more limitations. They're easier to qualify, not only because they're helping you with a lower down payment, but you also have a higher buying power because your debt to income, meaning how much you spend divided by how much you make, the percentage that it allow you to go up to is higher than when you do a conventional loan. So people will always go, well, I'd rather do a conventional loan because you don't pay for mortgage insurance, which is another thing to FHA programs. Since they're government-backed programs, there is an insurance added to it, right? And so that increases your rate and your payment. So people goes, I'll be crazy if I want to use that. I'll go for this. But then when we try to qualify them, and I'll make it very simple. Let's say your expenses are $6,000 with everything included, and you make $10,000, you don't qualify for neither one, unless you make more money or you put more down payment, right? But then let's say the payment is $5,300, then you qualify for an FHA loan, but not for a conventional one.
Right.
So for a conventional one, your payments will have to be $4,200. So that means you have to put more down payment or you have to make more money. So every case is different. And even if it wasn't a house that doesn't have an FHA approved, like meaning a condo or a townhome, if it's a house and that house has a cracked window, they're going to make you change it. So at that point the seller goes, I don't want to spend money. And the buyer doesn't want to change that window because if this doesn't close, then he just lost the money of fixing the window.
Right.
So that's why it's so important to go with somebody that you trust. And then also somebody is going to go to bat for you, because when those situations arise, you got to know how to handle that situation, because if not, a lot of money can be lost. And of course, a lot of time can be lost, because let's say that you never explain to that client that you're doing an FHA loan and then that window is broken. And he goes, I'm not going to fix it. I'm not going to fix it. You cancel escrow. That buyer might say, you know what? I don't even want to buy it. Now, I'm just going to wait until I save more money. But I just drove that client. Like, for example, we heathered for 3 months. Again, we don't get paid per hour. We get paid when we close the deals.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I fed him though. Okay.
yeah, she fed me here and there.
Here and there. That kind of leads into my next question. So I'm curious, like when you go see a house for the first time, like you're like, oh, I'm interested in buying this property, but I need to go look at it, right? What are some of the most important questions to ask the realtor when you go and see the house?
So an experienced realtor, and there is many different types of experience. There is realtors that have been doing this for 20 years and they have a good eye. There is realtors, for example, like me, that maybe I haven't been doing it for 20, 30 years, but I flipped homes, meaning I bought properties that were in distress. We fixed them up and then we sold them. So I got an eye on what to look for. because a lot of times the client just looks for the cosmetic stuff, which is cosmetic. You just
Exactly.
paint it. You just change that toilet.
Especially
Who cares?
women. Especially women.
Especially
We
the wives, of
want it
course.
to look good. Exactly.
So that stuff is no biggie. But what about that crack on that wall? Is the foundation broken? What about that there is a mark on the corner over there that looks a little bit yellowish? There was a leak here, or there is a roof leak.
Or is
So
there mold?
those are the things that you look for, and then your expert, the guy that is helping you find that property, can point out. Again, this doesn't mean that that's not the right house, right?
Yeah.
They probably fixed the roof, they just didn't paint. But that's when you ask questions, and throughout a real estate transaction, once you open escrow, there is going to be a lot of disclosures where the seller has to disclose any issues that had happened on that property. Well, my house flooded, so that's why the baseboards are lifted up, right? Or the carpet is with the stains. We had dogs, we have pets. All those questions are going to be asked throughout the transaction. Sometimes there is stuff that we can see with the bare eye, and there is items that we cannot. So that's why you have that period of time once you open escrow, right? Those contingency periods where you can do your own investigations, where you bring experts. But seasoned realtors can't point stuff out right away.
Let's say if we don't ask those questions, I mean, they have to disclose it, right?
They have to disclose it. That doesn't mean that they will. So there is a lot of lawsuits, especially in California, in real estate. So that's why it's 90, like people goes, I want to sell my house, but I don't want to pay a realtor. The fact is 97% of FISBOs for sale by owner, they end up selling with a realtor. Because all the liability is going to go on that salesperson, that seller. If you get a realtor, a lot of liability lands on their agent, because they're the ones handling the transaction and also having you fill up all this paperwork. But sometimes there is people that doesn't fill up the paperwork. And let's say you bought the house. One of the questions, for example, is if you ever sold drugs, or if there is houses around it that people sell drugs.
Right.
And they answered no. And then you move in, and then you realize that your neighbors is a crack house.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how these people didn't know? Well, you definitely knew, right?
Right.
Then that buyer can go in and sue that seller, and for thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there is paperwork to protect both sides, but people has to be realistic and honest about it.
I'm just curious, do they disclose death?
One of the questions is, has there been a death on the property in the last 3 years? I don't know where they come up with that. If it's been 3 years and 2 days, you can put no, right?
Wow.
If it's been 2 years, then you have to put yes, and then you have to explain. Anytime you answer yes, you have to put an explanation. So you can put passed away for natural causes, or somebody got killed in the porch. Wow. I had one of those, like somebody got killed at the porch. So you have to write that down. And that's when I'm in the listing side, when I'm selling a property. When I'm in the buyer side, we as realtors, the smart ones, not to waste any time, we put it on the remarks. That way you tell your client, hey, the house that you liked, somebody passed there.
Yeah.
So that's why they ask those questions.
Okay. So let's say if, we have that process, like realistically, as a buyer, how much should you set aside for emergency repairs or like unexpected expenses if you are just buying that house?
So you're saying you already have the money for the down payment, and now you bought a house, how much you set aside?
Yeah.
You have to set aside between 1 to 2% of what that property is worth. Why? A lot of people that just bought a house, he's been renting. And if your toilet broke, you call the landlord, right? If there was a issues with electricity, you call the landlord. And you have no idea how much that costs. If the water heater broke, it can cost anywhere from $800 to $3,000-$4,000.
Right.
Yeah.
So now you own the house. If that happens, you're the landlord. You're the one that has to fix that toilet. You're the one that has to fix that water heater. So it's very important. So if you buy a $500,000 house, 2% is $10,000. But there is going to be maintenance that you're going to have to do. So what is so important when you buy a house, and so important again to having an experienced realtor, when you buy a house, you buy something called the home warranty, which most of the time we have the seller pay for it, right? I always put it on the offer and I have the seller pay for it. So it's between $500 to $1,000, depending. If you have a pool, then it's a little bit more, because if the pool thing breaks, then that can cost a lot of money too. What the biggest mistake of homeowners sometimes is they bought it. Well, they didn't buy it. They got it because the seller paid for it. And then when it's going to expire, they don't renew it. There is ways to protect you from these unexpected things that can happen or cost. Right. But if you were to save, I would say between 1% to 2% of the purchase price of the house.
Like buying versus renting, like, is there a time where you're like, you actually should rent instead of buying? Well, that you've given like an advice to
yeah, like that's tied to Heather's question. If you're buying a house that is $700,000, and let's put aside the down payment and all that, you already have that. But if you don't have anything between $7,000 and $14,000, 1 to 2% in a 700,000, then you should think about it, right?
So after, I purchased a home, and we talked about this a little bit last week. How do I protect my assets for my kid? Like, what does that look like?
So I think what you're talking about is when you buy a house, there is something called title. So how do you hold title? Title means who's the owner of that house. So when you buy a house, there is different ways on how to hold title. The most common one, when it's a married couple, is joint tenants. But let's say the husband passes, right? And there were just joint tenants, and they didn't specify with right of survivorship, then that part of the house of the husband is going to go to probate, that 50%. And here in California, probate tax is up to 39%. Oof. So right away, you're losing 39% of that 50% of the husband, right? Yeah. So it's very important how you hold title. So if you're a husband and wife and you don't have a trust, a living trust, then you got to hold it as joint tenants with right of survivorship. Meaning, if one of the two passes, the whole house passes to the other. They have the right of survivorship. But what if they both pass? Then again, the house goes to probate.
Okay, so, and this is kind of a fun question. So, have you watched?
Oh, the other question's been boring. I didn't know that.
No, but like it's kind of a
I'm a real estate nerd.
Kind of a silly. It's a silly question.
Got it.
Okay, it's a silly question and like fun for me because I love the show. So, have you watched Selling Sunset?
I've seen the commercials, and I haven't watched that one. I've seen the commercials. I have watched a $1 Million Listing.
Okay, I like that one too. That one is kind of like there were drama there too, because I remember that show and I watched it. But like obviously now with like the girls, it's more like Keeping Up with the Kardashians meets $1 Million Listing kind of deal. And it might not make sense now, but like I was just curious from your perspective, how real does that show seem? Because they do go and they visit properties and like they try to sell it. They have like open brokerage parties and whatnot. Like, what's your take on it?
A lot of those broker parties or open houses, a lot of those things are real. The thing about that show is drama is extremely exaggerated. It's very dramatic, and that's what sells, I guess, the show. But the behind the scenes, which is what we talked about it throughout the podcast here, the home inspections, the broken bathroom, a lot of those things are in Sunset, which are on the hills in Hollywood Hills. Most of those houses they have foundation problems. Why? Because here there is earthquakes every day, all the time. Yeah. Sometimes we don't even feel them, but here the ground is always moving. We just had one like 3 weeks ago in Malibu, and then I have clients that live in Thousand Oaks, and their house is still moving. They don't show that in the show. They don't show that there was an inspector that crawled down under the house and found cracks, right? They just show how she took her boyfriend or took the husband and stuff like that. But the real estate transaction happens. I don't even know if those real estate transactions are for real.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, do you know a lot about the Oppenheim? No, yeah. Isn't it
Well,
Oppenheimer?
I know the Josh Alman, the Alman brothers, those guys that made it. That like the Alman brothers, they made it big because that show $1 million listing, and they're real realtors and they have real listings, right? And negotiating $1 million house, well, not a million because a million is a normal here day to day,
Right.
but negotiating multi-million-dollar properties
Right.
is going to be way different than negotiating an $800,000 house. Why? Because
Right.
the type of customer, you have a guy that owns a $50 million house is a more complex person than the one that doesn't owe the $15 million house. And then the person representing that client that is buying a $50 million house is the same way, right? So in these shows, a lot of those transactions are real. I just don't think they show even 80% of reality of the transaction. They show more the dramatization and the exaggerated day-to-day drama between them than the transaction itself. Like as we see it, they negotiated every deal over the phone, which I always negotiate every deal over the phone. But they never go in detail once you actually fill it up in paper and send that contracts, and then you go back and forward because there is items on the contract that we don't like, or I wanted to adjust it or change it. They don't show that part. They just go, oh no, man, that's too much. And then okay, I'll send you the offer. So there is a little bit more to it. A lot of, I mean, the houses are selling and buying, but there is a lot of drama. It's very exaggerated.
Right, which is why it's fun to watch.
The way I see it, the ones that really made it, they're not even on those shows anymore because they're so busy in their real business, which is real estate. Realtors are out there hustling, making money.
Right.
That's hilarious. Are you surprised? I haven't even seen any of them.
I don't see, like I said, I saw a $1 million listing many years ago.
Yeah. Ivan, a huge thank you for joining us today. You've given us and our listeners so much valuable information. We truly appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. Since our podcast is all about embracing life in your 30s and giving back an unfiltered look at what it means to be a millennial, we'd love to dive a little deeper into your experiences as a part of this generation. We have a few last thoughts. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your 30-year-old self?
I'll give it to my 23, 27-year-old self. My advice is even save 10% of what you're doing. If you just save a tenth, so if you have 10 coins, save one.
Ivan, what is one thing that surprised you about being an adult that you didn't expect?
I don't know when I became an adult. I think I became an adult maybe when I had my daughter, and I was 34. What age it was? Oh no, I had my daughter when I was 39. I got married at 34.
Okay.
So I think I became an adult at 39 when I had my daughter, even though I got married at 34. Because I was still kind of having fun and traveling with the wife, and of course I'm always working so I can take care of those trips to Vallarta and to different places. But I think I really felt as an adult that day that we're at the hospital, or when I needed to pay the hospital bill. Like, okay, now this, for anybody that had kids, it costs you no less than $20,000 to have a kid just for the hospital bill, right?
Yeah.
So I think at that moment is like, okay, now I have to be serious and I have to start looking out for a family now.
Human being. Yeah. Okay. So to close it off, where can people find you? And are you working on anything exciting at the moment?
Well, it's always exciting to help people buy homes. Right now, I'm helping a teacher that is married to a veteran. So veterans, for example, they have the benefit of buying a house with 100% financing because they're a veteran, right? So that's exciting to help. They're buying their first home. Their kids are like 14 and 13. So we're in the process of helping them out. So I think that's exciting. What else is exciting? I'm raising a 6-year-old. And she's a female and she's Colombian. So she has an attitude.
I love it. I love it. And then where can people find you?
My company is called Smart Equity Realty. So we have a website at smartequityrealty.com. In Instagram, we're at Smart Equity Realty altogether. And then if you go through there, of course, I'm in Instagram as well at Ivan Londono altogether. And then also have a LinkedIn. I'll send it to you guys, all that information. And then, of course, my cell phone will be in there. If you guys are in this area, or if you guys want just information or guidance of education, feel more than free to call me, because I will explain to you, even though you know you're not going to buy. I will take the time to explain it to you, because I know and I hope that when that happens, then you're going to call me, and then I will be more than happy to help you with that.
And then your office is
So I'm in Encino.
Yeah.
I'm in Encino, right on Ventura Boulevard between Balboa and White Oak. So they can also come and find me here. We can have coffee, we can chat. I can have a piece of paper and explain to you the different numbers of how to achieve home ownership and to retain home ownership. Because it's not just about buying, because you can buy a house, but that doesn't mean that you can keep up with it.
And also, what if someone wanted to buy a home not in California? Like, how far is your reach when it comes to?
We are, as I mentioned, we have an office in Florida. My business partner is there, so we can help people all over Florida in the real estate and, of course, in the loan side. And then if you wanted to buy in places like Texas, which is where a lot of people is moving to, Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico,
New York, all over the country, essentially.
We can help them in most of the states with the loan side.
Okay.
With the real estate side, we can only do like in-house, California and Florida. But we do have partners in those other states that we can refer you to, that they can help you out with the real estate side, and then we still help you with the finance side, the loan side. And then we work great as a team, and that way you feel like that you're being well taken care of.
Awesome.
And also, if you're out of the country, we can help people out too. As I mentioned, we help a lot of people from South America, from Colombia, buy properties.
Listen, Ivan is a huge resource. He knows a lot of people. So if you need anything, you can go to Ivan.
Even for restaurant recommendations.
Exactly.
That's my favorite part.
Exactly.
Thank you so much to everyone listening. We hope this episode gave you some real takeaways, whether you're ready to buy a home or just starting to think about it. Ivan has been a huge help to me personally, and I know he'll be a resource for many of you as well.
Thank you very much, guys, for having me, and looking forward to hear from anybody. I'm here to help, and go.
Be sure to subscribe, share with a friend, and leave us a review. See you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye,
have a great day. Go.
Bye.
Go.
End scene. Hey, thanks for listening. We hope you got some takeaways from today's episode.
You can also follow us on Instagram and YouTube at 30s Unfiltered, or email us at 30sunfiltered@gmail.com.
Please leave us a like, comment, and subscribe to our channels. See you next time.